All right, so here we are. We're going to start the inside of our bookmaking project. So you've already seen the ones that I showed you. I have this one that was, my theme for this was a landscape. Well, it was landscapes, but I did like a different one in each section. So here's one I did with a boat. This one I did with a palm tree. This one I did with mountains. And this one here, I haven't finished this one yet, but this I started off with mountains. And I did this in watercolor, and I used different watercolor techniques, okay? So there's that one. This one here, I did more of a comic style, Garfield, and I ended up doing comics inside with Garfield. And as you can see, I did colored pencil with this one. I have all of my background covered in colored pencil. I traced out this image of Garfield, but I also put a twist on it and put my own background into it. And I ended up doing the, I made up the story behind it too, which is very, very abstract and simple. So if you're going to use something that you end up printing out and you're going to trace it, I want you to put your own twist on it. So for instance, I have this car here, and say my theme is cars. Well, I'm going to take this car, I'm not going to just glue it on here and call it a day. We're going to take the car, I'm going to trace it, if I can get my light table on. I'm going to place it on my one page here. You won't be able to see it very well because it's making it look really dark. So I'm going to trace my car with as much details as I'd like. I'm just going to do it very fast, so it's going to be not very neat, just so that you can see what I'm going to do with it. So I got like the sporty car here. Okay, so I ended up tracing it with my light table. Light table off to the side here. And then what I'm going to do is turn it into some type of background. I'm not going to just leave it here and that's that. Okay, this project is all about creativity. Now you can do some tracing and some things to help guide you for reference pictures, but you are going to take some of your creativity and add to it. So I have this car that's floating here. So maybe what I'll end up doing is just putting like a road in here. Maybe in the background, the guy's like traveling in like this mountain area here. Got these mountains. You know, maybe he's in California and he's driving through Hollywood or something. I don't know. So I got my mountains in the background. And then maybe as once I end up coloring this in with colored pencil, I'll make this like the sky, and I'll make these mountains like different browns and all sorts of different colors, and then I'll make this maybe green for the grass, and then this the road. Okay, so I have this planned out. I could add text to it, and I don't know what kind of car this is, but say it's like a Ferrari. I could put the word Ferrari up here, or I could just leave it blank. Okay, so there's my first layout. And then since I did it right on this piece of paper here that I'm going to give you, you can use colored pencils on top of it. This paper is okay for using colored pencil. If we're going to end up doing something with paint, I'm going to give you different paper. All right, so that's if you're going to use colored pencil and you're just going to like draw your own image throughout here. Another thing that I could do is open up this whole entire insert, and I could put the car here and continue on with my mountains and my road, and maybe make more of like a whole scene throughout this whole entire piece here. So that's totally up to you what you end up doing with it. You can do each page individually or take it into one whole big unified canvas here. Okay. One thing I want to stress before we actually go any further is when I give this to you, you want to make sure our covers are going to go on the front here. So what I tend to tell my students is put an X on the two back sides of their paper first. That way you know that those are where the covers are going to go, and I'm not going to draw on there. Because nothing's worse than when you end up drawing on the one page here, and then you have to realize you have to put a cover on it, and you're like, oh no, all that for nothing, and now I have to put my cover on. So just to prevent you from doing that, you want to make sure that when you start off, you pay close attention. It's going to be these 4 insides here. Okay, so I have that drawn. Another thing that I could do is if I'm going to end up doing acrylic paint, say that is one of the media that I'm going to use. Acrylic paint is the paint that we just got done doing with our mandalas. And I have my image drawn out, and the image here is done on folio paper. This paper is a little bit thicker than the paper that I gave you. I'm going to end up painting this picture first, and then I'm going to end up like centering it into my page here and gluing it down when it's dry. Okay, so if you're going to end up doing paints, I have this character drawn up here, and I was going to do like a pop art style with this. So what I'm just going to end up doing first, before I do anything with the inside of my pages, is paint away. And I'll just paint the background first. And of course I took a brush that is very dry, and the bristles on it kind of dried paint on there, so they're not very good. So I'm going to carefully use the acrylic paint to paint my picture. So that is another option, is painting. If you really liked the acrylic paint project and you want to get a little bit more in depth with that paint, you can utilize this project and use that paint for it. Especially like if people really want to get into like maybe doing landscapes or people with the acrylic paint, you can do that. So this is another option. Okay. So what I would end up doing is eventually painting this whole thing, and then I would have to do at least 3 more characters. Or maybe each page would be something different than a character. Depends on the theme too. Okay. Okay, so there's that option, all right? Another option is to use watercolor paints. We have not used watercolor paints yet this year, but they can be a lot of fun. There's many different things that you can do with them. As you saw with my landscape one, I did watercolors on watercolor paper, and I ended up collaging different, I cut up shapes and stuff with my paper, and then I ended up making like scenes out of it. So it's almost like a collage with the watercolor paper. So, you can do something like that if you'd like. What I have here as my sample is I have watercolor paper that I started off with. This theme is like flowers. I chose it because we did this as a sample today. I drew out my flowers. I ended up pen and inking it. Actually, it's just Sharpie for now. And then I'm going to end up using watercolors to paint it. So my plan for this was I was going to use maybe like each page, my 4 pages, I was going to use a different type of flower. Okay. So now I'm just going to end up painting this with watercolor. I love using watercolors and ink together. They're so nice. As you can see, this one is darker than that side. That's because I used more water on the first one. The more water you use with watercolors, the lighter it will be. The less water you use, the more vibrant it will be. Okay. This might be a fun option if you haven't, since we haven't done watercolors yet, to be able to experiment with them a little bit. Another fun thing is you can use watercolors and like other mixed media. So for instance, if I'm using watercolor there, I used pen. I could maybe even do some areas with just colored pencils. So maybe maybe in this area, I would use my colored pencil. That's up to you how you do it. Or maybe just the flowers I would do an all colored pencil, and then I would do my background. I'll just do a little section here for you. Maybe my background I would just do in watercolor. Okay. Alright, so that's another option. So I would continue on with that, make 4 of those. Another option is, I want to show you collaging. I know I mentioned collaging before. So I have my landscapes here. You can see how I cut out letters. You can cut out letters and stuff. You can collage with different shapes. I have like this watercolor stuff, this paper already made up. And you can take a scissors and I'm going to actually maybe write the word flowers. So I'm going to take this colored paper and I'm going to cut an F out of it for the word flowers. Okay, so there's that. And then I would keep going with the L and the O and W and so on. Another thing which kind of is interesting sometimes is just ripping paper. You can use this like as a border. So for instance, if I was decorating one of my pages in here, say I wanted to make some sort of landscape like I did with mine. Let's see here. Actually, I'm going to overlap this. I can make some sort of landscape out of it. I don't like how this is. Then I would just glue this down. I don't like how that's flat. It's just more interesting sometimes when you rip paper. It's more organic rather than just like flat looking. Gives it some texture. I could glue that down. Oh, I have an idea. I could glue that down and then maybe draw some images out of it, like flowers or something. Maybe another thing I could do once I glue that down, or I could take this and make some sort of flower out of it. And kind of place the paper in all different ways just to make some image out of it. I'm not going to glue it down until I play around with it a little bit. Stem. And then arrange this in a way. Oh, kind of interesting. I can do some interesting things with that. So all it is like torn up paper and trying to make some sort of image out of it or landscape out of it. So there's that option. It's sometimes fun just to play around with different media and see what works well. Okay, so there's that idea. Some things I also want to show you when you are like done with your picture. So say I'm finished with my flowers, then instead of just gluing it down on this white background, some things that you could do is you could take, I have lots of like different colored paper. You could take some just colored construction paper, and I can glue this down, some hot glue, and then I could glue this and border it. Or maybe I can glue it down a little bit, and then I can start taking my letters, and then let's see, if I cut the other L, L for the flowers, and then I would cut my O. O's are tricky. I'll show you a way to do an O. If I fold it in half after I cut out the circle, and then I just cut a little bit on the crease, makes an O. Okay, and then I could glue that down. All right. So there's many different creative things that you can do. It's endless. I just wanted to show you some of the basics of starting this. So think about it. When you're planning and you're doing your sketches, you might have already done your sketches, but when you're trying to plan for your media, this is where why I said don't plan your media yet right away, because after you get your thumbnail sketches all ready, you want to start thinking about how you're going to do it. Are you going to print out some pictures and trace it and then add to it to make your own spin on it? Are you going to acrylic paint it? Are you going to watercolor it? Are you going to just draw it? Are you going to collage it? There's all sorts of things. Are you going to add lettering to it? There's all sorts of things that you can do. So get creative with it. Have a plan before you start. And that is the tips that I could give you so far to start with this project. All right. Thank you for your time.